In today's video, we're going to discuss which teams I think are the biggest winners and the biggest losers so far in NHL Free Agency. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We'll review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, today we're going to discuss the teams that I think are the biggest winners and the biggest losers so far in NHL Free Agency. So obviously for me to declare them one of the biggest winners, that means they made some excellent signings, good value on some good players. The teams I'm calling the biggest losers here are teams I felt either overspent on dollars or term or a combination of both and gave some contracts out that they're going to soon regret in the not too distant future here. Now, first of all, let's jump in with a couple of the teams that I think were some big winners. One of those teams I think is the St. Louis Blues. I was very impressed how the St. Louis Blues handled the first few days here of NHL Free Agency. Not only they made some good signings, but they made an excellent trade with the Buffalo Sabres, picking up Ryan O'Reilly, who was slotted in the number 2 center position, which will really enhance their center depth, which is going to be huge for that team moving forward. Salary cap wise, between what they brought in and what they brought out, they're really in a very similar position, but they have a much upgraded forward depth, which is great. So I think the addition of O'Reilly is going to be huge. But the signings that I was really impressed with is they also brought in center Tyler Bozak from Toronto. He's going to add even more center depth. So now they're going to have Braden Shen, Ryan O'Reilly, and Tyler Bozak 1, 2, 3 down the middle. I think that's going to be pretty solid myself. That certainly increases their center depth greatly over last season. They've also brought back David Perron as well. Obviously, Perron's been with the Blues on a number of occasions now. Had an excellent year at the Vegas Golden Knights last year, and he's returned on a 4-year, $4 million contract. So I really like that signing as well. They really needed some more secondary scoring. If Perron can keep up what he's been doing here and duplicate what he did in Vegas last year, yeah, that'll prove to be an excellent signing by the St. Louis Blues. They did end up losing goaltender Carter Hutton, which was a little bit of a big blow, but at the same time, Carter Hutton made it clear he wanted more playing time, and he wasn't going to be getting that in St. Louis as long as they have Jake Allen under contract. So after losing him, they go out and sign veteran backup Chad Johnson to a 1-year contract, which I think is a wise move. I think he's a solid choice for a backup goaltender. Short-term deal, so gets him through this one season. We can see how he does. You can see hopefully how Jake Allen can play. Hopefully he can bounce back and have a solid year. And then obviously they do have some goaltending prospects coming up here through the ranks here that should be ready in a year or two to kind of move into that NHL role as well. So obviously this is a good short-term signing for the Blues. So overall, I was quite pleased with what they've done here. They really enhanced their center depth. They were able to replace Carter Hutton. I know Chad Johnson, so far, if you look at the numbers for the past few years, Hutton would have proved to have more solid numbers than Johnson. But at the same time, if they weren't going to be able to keep Hutton, they had to do something. Once they knew they were losing Carter Hutton, he was going to be moving on to get more playing time elsewhere. I do think they made a pretty decent choice in Chad Johnson amongst the options that were available for backup goaltender. So overall here, like I said, I really like what the St. Louis Blues have done. I don't think they spent too much money here. They gave David Perron a very fair contract, 4 years, $4 million. They got a good backup goaltender on a 1-year deal. They signed Tyler Bozak to a 3-year contract of $5 million per season. So, you know, they might have overspent a little bit on Bozak, but I like the term. 3 years is pretty good for where he's at in his career. And really $4 to $5 million for that type of center iceman is pretty reasonable based on the current salary cap and new contracts being handed out. So overall, I like what they've done here, and I think they're going to be a much better team because of it. Now, another big winner here that I'm going to declare as a team that did very well is the Calgary Flames. I've been very impressed so far with how General Manager Brad Treliving has handled this offseason. We started off with the draft where he made a big trade with the Carolina Hurricanes, bringing in Noah Hanifin as well as Elias Lindholm in exchange for Dougie Hamilton and Michael Ferland, as well as prospect Adam Fox. So I do like that trade for both sides. I think short term, maybe the Hurricanes come ahead, but you know, longer term, I think the Flames will pull ahead here. They get themselves some quality young players who are very familiar with the new head coach, Bill Peters, that was just signed, and I think they will fit very nicely with the Flames. So I like those moves that they started off the season well. Then they go into free agency and they get themselves some more secondary scoring, which was absolutely crucial. Beyond Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan and to a degree Matthew Tkachuk, they just weren't getting much from those numbers. You know, the forward slotting into that 4, 5, 6, 7 spots. They just weren't getting the extra production. They needed some upgrades in the top 6. They go out and they get the real deal, James Neal. I think James Neal is going to be a tremendous addition to the top 6 here with the Calgary Flames. He could either slot on on the first line or the second line. Gives them some options. You throw in Lindholm. I think Lindholm, to a degree, if he can play up to his potential, could be an upgrade over Ferland. I mean, Ferland plays a different style of game for sure, but I do like those two additions into Calgary's top 6 forwards here. So obviously signing Neal, I think, was key. They also go out and they sign center Derek Ryan, gives them some more depth at the center ice position. Again, another player familiar with Bill Peters from Carolina. Derek Ryan will end up playing in a third, fourth line center position for the Flames, give them some much needed depth, and he's coming off a pretty decent season, I thought, in Carolina, so he's an excellent depth signing for sure. They also signed defenseman Dalton Prout as a depth defenseman here, and they also brought in Austin Cernick as well, who's going to be another depth forward, possibly have a shot at maybe some third or fourth line duties as well. James Neal and Derek Ryan were the two major signings though for this team. They're a little bit more important than the other guys here. They'll certainly have a chance to play a bigger role for sure, but I really like those additions to the Flames alongside with the trade they made at the draft. I really like how the Flames are trending here, so I'm quite pleased with their signings. I think they've done a good job, and I'm certainly going to declare them one of the winners of NHL Free Agency 2018. Big winner of NHL Free Agency is not going to come at any surprise. It's got to be the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've landed the big fish on the market. John Tavares, number 91, is now a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. You could certainly argue that right now they have the most depth at center ice, the absolute best in the NHL. In Austin Matthews, John Tavares, and Nazem Kadri, 1, 2, 3 down the middle. I don't think you can really get any better than that. That's some pretty impressive centers there. They get some great wingers to play along with them. They got a great goaltender. Yes, you do hear the argument that their defense needs work, and yes, probably is the weak point of their team. But overall here, they are pretty solid. They could use some upgrades for sure on the back end, but really considering the season that they just put together in the regular season with a weak defense, I think they are not as weak as a lot of people make them out to be, but it is the one area of their team that could certainly focus on improving on. But they have a lot of great prospects coming up through the ranks, and I can understand why they wouldn't want to sign any other big defensemen here, longer term deals, because this is really going to block a lot of their young prospects from getting into the lineup here in the short term. Also, Tavares at the 7-year, $11 million contract, which is obviously huge for the Leafs. I know the fans are ecstatic about this, rightfully so, but they also made a couple other little depth signings, which I think could prove to be very valuable here. These other signings I think that they made could either prove to be valuable when it just comes to having the depth that you need to get through a long playoff series, or maybe they're extra assets they can sell off at the trade deadline. Either way, they're very cheap contracts that could prove pretty valuable, really, and there's certainly very low risk, but potentially a decent reward out of it. And that's forwards Josh Juris as well as Tyler Ennis. I mean, these guys are not exactly, but haven't been lighting it up in the NHL the last few years. They've been kind of struggling to find their way. Tyler Ennis has a little bit more pedigree, a little bit more of a history of having some success in the NHL, where Juris has kind of been bounced around to a few teams now. Had the most success when he started with the Calgary Flames, but either way, they got these guys on 1-year deals for $650,000. Considering the amount of games they have under their belt, I think that could be an absolute steal. So I'm quite impressed not only with the Leafs able to land Tavares, but obviously just these smaller depth moves I think could prove to be very valuable here long term. So I think because of landing the big fish here in John Tavares, we can safely say the Toronto Maple Leafs are the big winner of NHL Free Agency 2018. Now let's jump into a couple teams here that I think so far are the big losers of 2018 Free Agency, that I have not been impressed with their signings. Some of it is not necessarily the players themselves, but the terms and dollars handed out, and some of it to a degree is the players. So let's jump in here. Now, in my opinion, one of the bigger losers of free agency, unfortunately, is the Vancouver Canucks. Now, I'm not so much unimpressed with the players that they chose to sign. I do understand that between Jay Beagle, Antoine Roussel, and Tim Schaller, I mean, I'm not surprised they went out and signed a few of these guys. It does not surprise me at all. Based on having such a young team with a lot of skill, it certainly makes a lot of sense that they'd want to have some bottom six guys who can play, who can play a leadership role, who can play a little bit more of a physical game, who can, kill some penalties, that type of thing. And these are good quality players. I don't like the contracts that Jim Benning gave out here at all. I think they gave out way too much term and way too much money, and within a year or so are going to start to soon regret it. I think there was some, either could have given these guys a little bit cheaper, or perhaps had some better options for less money here. It wouldn't tied them up so long. So Jay Beagle and Antoine Roussel are both got 4-year deals at $3 million per. I mean, that's just way too much term. I think you could argue the money's too much as well. But the 4 years for those guys, I think it's just too much. Dollar contract's not as bad. It's a 2-year deal at 1.9, but that's a pretty expensive fourth line considering all the youth they have and all the skill that's coming up in the Canucks organization. I'd hate to see guys like this kind of block some prospects out for starters. But like I said, I do think they do need some players like this, some role players that can play in that bottom six. Kill some penalties, win some faceoffs, be leaders. Be that physical presence to protect the young kids. I get it. I totally do. I don't have any objection with the type of players or even these particular guys. I just think they handed out way too much term and dollar. I think Jim Benning and company is going to in turn regret signing these guys to as long a term as they have and as much money as they have here in the near future. But overall, I think things are looking up in Vancouver. I think they have potential to be a really strong team here in a few years. They have a ton of awesome looking prospects. So the team is a team on the rise for sure. Just not real pleased with these deals that Jim Benning handed out on July the 1st. The other big team here, which I'm going to declare the biggest loser of free agency for multiple of reasons, is unfortunately the New York Islanders. I mean, for starters, they lost John Tavares. I mean, and that's something that they should have seen coming. We've been talking about Tavares here for a long time. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? Every time the Islanders made a move, is that going to be enough? They brought in Lou Lamoriello. They hired Barry Trotz. Is this going to be enough? They get a new building in place. They signed Josh Bailey to a long-term deal mid-year. Are all these things going to add up to be enough to keep Tavares? And at the end of it, it wasn't. And, the sad part is, in one of the videos I made a while back around the trade deadline, personally, I said if I was running that team, I would have went to Tavares, tabled my absolute best offer, and said, if you're not going to sign this offer, I'm going to have to trade you as much as I don't want to. I got to protect the organization and get some assets back. Now, it was reported as well that Tavares had requested not to be traded, that he didn't want to go down that road and was certainly seriously considering re-signing. But based on everything that's gone down and how he signed with the Leafs, I really think it was in his heart all along that he really was hoping to go back home. I mean, you can't help but wonder that. I mean, even if you line up how the teams went into all those meetings with Tavares, the Leafs were number 1, the Islanders were number 2. I mean, he was even asked that on an interview that I listened to. Is there any coincidence that the Leafs were the first team to meet with you when you met with all those teams out in Los Angeles at your agent's office? And he said, oh, no, it was just a scheduling thing and whatever. It's like, you can't help but wonder if his heart really was leaning towards going to Toronto all along. I guess at the end of the day, they lost him. It doesn't really matter. They had him in their organization for a long time, and unfortunately, they just did not do a good enough job of building a winning team around him to make him want to stay and be with this team any longer term. So, it's on them. I mean, they made a lot of good moves in the last few months to get the ship turned around, but it was too little too late. And hopefully for their sake, they can get things turned around in the right direction here. They do still have some good pieces to work with, and hopefully they can take advantage of that. They had a good draft as well. But unfortunately, even though they made all these good moves leading into free agency, they hired Lou, they hired Barry Trotz, they had a great draft, and then they go into free agency and they made some really dumb signings, in my opinion. I'm just not impressed at all. They signed Leo Komarov, give him a 4-year deal. I mean, that's just a head scratcher. I mean, Leo Komarov is a useful forward. He can play a bottom 6 role. He can kill some penalties. A 4-year deal at $3 million per season just seems like a little bit much. I really don't get that. I think they're going to regret the term on Komarov. I mean, 4 years I think is way too long. I mean, even at the end of even this past year or two in Toronto, he was a serviceable guy, played his role, but you can tell he's not quite as effective as he was even a few years ago. He's not really old per se, but I just don't see Leo Komarov being really all that effective in being a $3 million player in 2, 3, or 4 years down the road. Will they get a good season or two out of him? Maybe, but I just, of all the guys they could have went after, there's a little bit of a head scratcher. Then they turn around and signed Valtteri Filppula as well. Obviously, he's an aging forward. He does have some skill, but at this time and point in his career, not certainly what he used to be. They also signed Tom Kuhnackel as well. I mean, these guys, they're not bad players, but they're just not what they need. They just handed out too much money to these guys that are going to be playing bottom 6 roles. The one good thing the Islanders did do is they signed goaltender Robin Lehner. They gave him a 1-year deal. It's one of those, what they call a show-me contract. Prove yourself that you're worthy of staying in this league, and we'll offer you an extension. He got 1 year at $1.5 million. They needed a goalie. They needed one badly, and Lehner was certainly one of the better options on the free agent market. So I do applaud them for that signing. I hope for Lehner's sake and for the Islanders' sake, that works out. I've been kind of waiting for Robin Leonard to get his game together now for quite some time. And if he can play to the best of his abilities, he has proven at times he can be a real solid netminder. So hopefully he can get things together. But these other signings for the Islanders, between losing Tavares, then you go back and your fallback plan is to go to Leo Komarov and Val Filppula. I just don't like it. I think they would have been better off just to play some younger players. They have all kinds of prospects in their organization that deserve an NHL shot. I just would have went with a younger, faster skilled team myself than bringing some of these veterans that just are going to be blocking prospects out of the lineup. In my opinion here, they lost Tavares. Obviously they need to fill that hole, and none of these guys are going to do that. And there was really nobody on the open market that was going to do that anyway. But I would give more likely to give that shot to a young prospect who might be able to put the puck in the net a few times, rather than have these aging veterans take up that much time and space on my roster for the next 4 years like Komarov. It just doesn't make sense to me. So let me know down in the comments, who do you think was the big winners of NHL Free Agency, and who do you think are the big losers? Do you agree with my selections, or do you think some other teams might have done a better job, or in some cases here, a worse job? Let me know what you think, and we'll discuss further down in the comment section. Now, if you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans, so enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.